Thank you so much, Emma, and good morning, everybody. My name is Christina Schødt-Liaus. I am the Regional Director for the Department for International Trade in the UK, based here in Copenhagen, where I'm with you this morning. It's a real pleasure for me to welcome you to our FinTech Sandbox session. Today, we will be discussing the differences and similarities between the UK and EU regulatory frameworks. We have a very diverse range of speakers from the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK and regulatory authorities from across the EU. They will tell us all about the regulatory frameworks of their countries and explore the opportunities of the fintech sector in their market. It's also fantastic to see so many people, participants joining us from all across Europe. And after 1 year of us all sitting in front of our screens everywhere in Europe, it's most appreciated that you have chosen to spend the next hour or so with us to explore regulatory frameworks and the opportunities in the UK and EU fintech sectors. First of all, allow me to present the very impressive speakers who are with us today. First of all, we have Ravi Bala, the Head of Innovation of the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK. We have Claus Almen, Innovation Coordinator from the Financial Supervisory Authority in Sweden. We have Evelina Kvedara-Vichuete she's the project manager for the newcomer Sandbox from the Bank of Lithuania. We have Rita Soares, Head of Payment Innovation and Policy from the Bank of Portugal. We have Fernando Hernandez Dominguez, advisory member of the Spanish Ministry of Economics. And here we have Martina Tambucci and Pasquale Munafo from CONSOB, the government authority of Italy, regulating the securities market. What a fantastic lineup. But that is also necessary because the financial sector is complex, inherently risky, and highly regulated. Fintech companies have added complexities and pose new challenges for regulators and supervisors across the group. In response, our authorities across Europe have been adopting different initiatives to stay up to date with the rapid tech developments and to encourage the development of their own fintech ecosystems. Many countries have established regulatory sandboxes and innovation hubs to respond to the challenges arising from that technological development. So innovation hubs, they encourage the companies to share knowledge, to foster collaboration, and to provide a platform for companies to engage with supervisory authorities and discuss fintech-related issues. I hear lots of talk about regulatory sandboxes, so perhaps it would be worth for us providing you a definition of what is exactly a regulatory sandbox. Well, a regulatory sandbox is a framework set up by a regulator to allow fintech companies and startups to conduct live experiments. So live experiments in a controlled environment under regulatory supervision. Such an environment, a sandbox, provide access to expertise and enable direct testing of innovative products, services, or business models with a degree of regulatory lenience and certain safeguards, of course. In the UK Fintech Conduct Authority pioneered the world's first regulatory sandbox. That was back in 2015. And to date, over 50 countries have adopted similar sandboxes. The sandbox idea was really what provided the platform for a significant leap forward for the UK fintech sector and the financial regulation in the UK. The fintech sector in the UK enjoy, of course, a very strong government support, a forward-leaning approach to regulation, and access to an impressive level of skills and capital. This is really what has fueled the fintech's rapid growth in the UK and the international expansion of UK fintech companies. As you know, the UK has long been on the forefront of innovation in financial services. That is no secret. The UK is the leading global fintech hub with a thriving ecosystem and international talent, a pool of international talent actually located all across the UK. You might think it's only in London, but it's spread all across the UK. We have an increasing number of fintech companies that are also exporting their services, their fintech services globally from a base in the UK. And the UK is continuing to set sort of the global standards for the application of technology in the financial sector, and more broadly to foster innovation in financial services. You will know also that the UK is home to powerhouses such as Wise or Starling, Onfido, Monzo, Revolut, and Checkout.com, and many more companies. In fact, today the UK represents over 10% of the global market share in fintech. So during the past years, regulatory sandboxes are gaining traction in Europe, but with or without a sandbox, all regulators are trying to keep abreast with the latest fintech innovations and initiatives, and will of course likely continue to do so in the future, creating new opportunities for innovative companies in this exciting sector. So without further ado, I would now like to pass the word to our first speaker and invite Ravi Bala, the Head of Innovation at Financial Conduct Authority in the UK, to address this topic. Ravi, the floor is yours. Thank you. Do we have sound?
Thank you very much, Christina, for that introduction, and also just that scene setting as well in terms of the UK position. So thank you very much, first of all, for inviting our FCA Innovate team to such an exciting event. This presentation aims to introduce Innovate and our regulatory sandbox initiative, how it operates and how it fits within the services Innovate offers. So my name is Ravi Bala, and I am Head of Department for Innovate at the FCA. I'm also joined by my colleague Stephen McWhirter as well, who leads our strategy and engagement team and plays a critical role in some of the activities that we'll cover today. If we can move over to slide 2, please. So what is our purpose, and why do we exist? So that this should be outlined on slide 2. Our aim is to serve the public interest by improving the way the UK financial system works and how firms conduct their business. The FCA has a single strategic objective to ensure that the relevant markets function well. We also have 3 operational objectives. Firstly, to secure an appropriate degree of protection for consumers, to protect and enhance the integrity of the UK financial system, and thirdly, to promote effective competition in the interests of consumers. It's this last operational objective that supports the work that we do in the Innovate department. So we promote effective competition by helping firms with innovative business models operate and develop in the regulatory context. When competition works well, consumers are empowered as well as informed. In turn, firms strive to win customers on the basis of service, quality, price, and innovation. And this helps generate better innovation, better outcomes for consumers. If we can move over to slide 3, please. So Innovate exists broadly for 4 reasons. Firstly, to learn about how innovation in the markets we regulate will give rise to opportunities and risks. Secondly, to stimulate and foster desirable innovation safely. And thirdly, to support the FCA in its digital and data-led transformation. And finally, to influence the domestic and global regulatory innovation agenda. So if we can move over to slide 4, please. This really explains the history and how our services fits within the firm's development lifecycle. So the Innovate department offers a wide range of services, which we call our firm-facing services. That includes our regulatory sandbox, our digital sandbox, direct support and advice unit, and our engagement with our domestic and international ecosystem through bilateral and multilateral agreements, and our global financial innovation network. And we're going to unpack this a lot more in this presentation. So Innovate actually started off as a project which was initially launched in 2014, and the remit and the functions of what we now call Innovate have grown ever since. This initiative began with understanding that there was a need to help firms with innovative business models to operate and develop in the regulatory context. So we decided to stand direct support, where we provide valuable, insightful, and unique regulatory support to innovative firms. To date, direct support has received over 1,500 applications since its inception in 2014. Our direct support team, coupled with our engagement function, which Stephen leads, gave us an excellent and sound basis to proactively reach out and participate in the fintech ecosystem. And as our experience and understanding increased, we recognized that there was a clear need to provide regulatory support to firms looking to test their innovations live in the market with real consumers, but on a controlled basis. So to deliver this, we added the regulatory sandbox to Innovate's offering, and we launched our first cohort in 2016, and our seventh cohort of successful firms was published in July this year. And to date, we have seen a total of 110 sandbox tests. The regulatory sandbox seeks to provide firms with the ability to test products and services in a controlled environment. It potentially has the ability to reduce time to market and potentially lower costs, to find appropriate consumer protection safeguards, to build into new products and services, and to better access, to receive better access to finance through the demonstration that the proposed innovation works in a real world context. The Global Financial Innovation Network, which we call GFIN, is a good example of how we are playing a role in fostering collaboration and development of regulatory approaches globally. The FCA established GFIN in January 2019 from an initial group of 12 regulators globally, and that's increased rapidly to 76 participants from all corners of the world and from all financial sectors, including central banks, securities, insurance, and consumer protection regulators. We're also proud to have reputable observers contributing to the work of GFIN, including the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the consultative group to assist the poor. We believe this is testament to the wider interest in the global regulatory community and their desire to come together to collaborate and share experiences on innovation-related topics. As the world increasingly digitalizes and digital markets increasingly go beyond traditional borders and continents, we believe regulatory harmonization and collaboration will remain vitally important. With that in mind, we are keen to ensure GFIN helps to keep financial markets safe, secure, and resilient for consumers. In terms of our national and international engagement, we've been keen to ensure that our regulatory framework supports a thriving and healthy fintech and innovation ecosystem in the UK. And this is something that doesn't happen in isolation. We really strive to work together with other regulators and stakeholders. And to date, we've signed 13 cooperation overseas regulators and also have an active domestic ecosystem where we work with a wide range of organizations through fintech network. Leveraging such insight, we can ensure that our work both domestically and internationally, including through GFIN, provides helpful insights and greater impact. To quote the great Greek philosopher Aristotle, the whole world is greater than the sum of its parts. And we believe this applies equally to regulatory collaboration, both nationally and internationally. Our digital sandbox, we also refer to that more informally as the Digi Sandbox, aims to support early stage innovation by providing access to a secure digital environment and synthetic data assets where products and solutions can be tested, validated and showcased to regulator and industry observers. We conducted a pilot earlier this year which supported 28 firms, having received 94 applications in total. The regulatory and digital sandboxes are designed to complement each other as firms progress on their regulatory journey and offer different services, tools, and features. Overall, our services work together by supporting firms in each stage of the development cycle. In the very early stage, where we have direct support and advice unit, through to piloting and prototyping phases such as tech sprints, to early stage models, is our digital sandbox, are models which are more fully built in terms of regulatory sandbox testing live in the market on a controlled basis. And finally, we work towards the diffusion and scaling of such innovative business models and regulatory insights through our national and international cooperation and agreements. If we can move over to slide 5, where I'll explain what the sandbox is and what it isn't. So this is where we get into the heart of the presentation, and the regulatory sandbox is really a space to test new ideas with real consumers. Firms can use that data and insights gathered from their test to inform the further development of models for when they come to roll out the model at a large scale outside of the sandbox. The sandbox is open to both authorised and unauthorised firms that are looking to deliver innovation in the UK financial services market. Firms in the sandbox will have a dedicated case officer and get access to regulatory expertise. We appreciate that innovative businesses may not always fit nicely with existing regulatory frameworks, so we help firms to better interpret our rules and reduce regulatory uncertainty for them. We closely oversee the tests by working with firms to identify key risks to consumers and agree on bespoke safeguards. And the sandbox has really provided us with a great deal of value, and it's given us many market policy development, particularly around crypto assets, open banking and many others. And it's really important to be clear that the sandbox firms are not exempt from regulation. In fact, we don't think that would be helpful, because when a firm finally exits the sandbox, they may struggle to cope with regulations in the real world. However, we apply a degree of proportionality in terms of the rules and the requirements which apply to them. The conversations that we have with sandbox firms enables us to build a shared understanding of where flexibility might exist, and equally where it might not exist as well. So therefore, we have a tailored authorizations process who are accepted into the sandbox, and any authorization will be restricted, most commonly around the number of consumers to be acquired. So this is where proportionality comes in, and that enables our approach to be risk-based. At the end of the testing period, if a firm meets our threshold conditions and other relevant requirements, the restriction can be lifted and the firm will be fully authorized. And so in terms of, for the FCA, the sandbox helps the FCA achieve its competition objective by supporting more firms getting to market and driving better services or cheaper prices. But as well as supporting firms, the FCA benefits from running a sandbox. We are able to see how new technologies and innovations work in the market, what works well for consumers and what doesn't, what risks arise from new technologies, and what controls can be put in place to mitigate those risks. These insights can be shared with our colleagues in policy to help shape our view on policy questions, or with supervisors to flag any risks with different types of business models. If we can now turn to slide 6, where I'll explain the sandbox eligibility criteria and how we assess it and also the tools which are available. So firms that apply to our regulatory sandbox need to meet our eligibility criteria, of which there are 5 key aspects. They are: the proposition needs to be in scope. This means that the firm will either carry out a regulated activity or will support firms that carry out regulated activities in the financial services market. Proposition needs to be genuinely innovative. The product or service being tested in the sandbox needs to be new or significantly different from existing propositions in the market. It should also offer good prospects of consumer benefits directly or through increased competition. And there needs to be a need for the sandbox. There needs to be a real need to test their proposition with real consumers. What is it that they want from the testing in the sandbox? Which means that they would rather not go down straight through the authorizations route. We want firms to have identified questions or hypotheses or a set of hypotheses which they will want to test in the sandbox. For example, how will consumers engage with my model? How will consumers understand the information that is presented to them? And last but not least, there is readiness for testing. As Sandbox is tested with real consumers, clearly firms need to have a model that is fully built and functioning. Therefore, we do require firms to be at a relatively mature stage of development when they apply to Sandbox. Once firms are deemed eligible, we provide them with the regulatory support needed. This can be done through our Sandbox tools. What we provide to firms are predominantly driven by their needs. The typical tools which are available include that we can firms, including those with a tech background, who have a great idea to understand how regulation works. And this can be done through issuing an informal steer on specific regulatory questions that the firm has. We can also direct or signpost firms to relevant areas of our FCA handbook or FCA publications, which will help them to progress. And if a firm needs to be authorised to carry out their test, we support them through the process to get a restricted authorisation. In a case where a firm considers that there is a particular burdensome rule that applies to them, we can issue a waiver. This means that we might be able to waive or modify an unduly burdensome rule for the purposes of the test. We also provide high-level feedback and signposting to firms that we reject. We provide questions to their business model and risks of harm they might introduce to consumers. Once we effort and steer in firms to the right direction when they apply to the regulatory sandbox. And again, it's really important to us to emphasize again that the regulatory sandbox is not a regulatory regulation exempt space, and that we do apply that degree of proportionality, which is absolutely crucial in those instances. So, for example, to bring that to life, a firm that potentially sells a product to 200 consumers for a 6-month period in testing probably shouldn't be subject to the same level of requirement as a firm that sells to 1 million customers on a long-term basis, and therefore that's where we provide that degree of proportionality and that risk-based approach. The testing period, if a firm meets our threshold conditions, those restrictions can be lifted and they will be fully authorized at that point. We can now turn to slide 7, and this really explains the steps that firms undertake when applying to the regulatory sandbox. So since its launch, the regulatory sandbox has operated on a cohort basis, which means that firms can only apply during a specific window in the calendar year. In August this year, the regulatory sandbox moved to being always open. So this allows firms to submit their application throughout the year. By making this change, firms can now access our sandbox testing services at the right point in their development cycle to maximize the benefits of live market testing for progressing their innovative models. The steps in the sandbox process are application, assessment of the application, testing phase, and exiting the sandbox. And each stage requires careful consideration as we move forward. We are seeking to improve the firm's journey. As for our move to being always open, we introduced a new digital application form. This is to ensure that we can move faster into the future and move towards a digital first single point of entry for all of our firm-facing services to make it clearer in terms of discoverability, to navigate and to apply for all of our firm-facing services in an instant manner. We have made a number of other changes to our services. So by fostering innovation in a more effective way, we will better achieve our competition objective and facilitate the development of better services or products to benefit consumers. So this includes areas such as a digital firm journey, data-led insights, and a digital first single point of entry. And I will unpack all three of those shortly. So in terms of digital firm journey, as part of the changes, we will also be improving the overall experience of our firm-facing services through applying a design thinking and design first mindset to our firm experience journey. This will enable us to gather more information and insights on the business models that wish to test in our sandbox and around the firm experience and user journey. This will lead to a more data-led set of insights and judgments on the tests that we oversee and enable them to be more, our services to be more efficient and effective over time. Secondly, in terms of data-led insights, we're considering how to share insights to the wider market for their benefit to reach a wider audience than we currently do, including content from firms who have completed a full support life cycle or lessons learned from rejected applications to increase future application quality. And thirdly, delivering a point of entry for our three firm-facing services that includes our direct support advice hub and regulatory sandbox. Currently, the FCA has multiple points of entry, and the move towards a single digital first single point of entry will improve the overall firm experience journey. The above are future planned changes that we'll be looking to deliver in due course. If we could move on to slide 8. So this is where I'll explain the benefits of the regulatory sandbox for both. So for firms in the sandbox, they have a dedicated case officer and get access to regulatory expertise. As I said previously, innovative businesses don't always neatly fit with our existing regulatory framework, and we help firms to better interpret our rules and reduce regulatory uncertainty. We closely oversee the test by working with firms to identify key risks to consumers and agree on those bespoke safeguards for consumers. And with the support of the Sandbox team, firms can test out their propositions in the real market with consumers, but they are closely supervised when they do that. The Sandbox allows firms to test their models in the market in a small controlled environment, and firms can use the data and insights gathered from their test to inform further development of their model for when they come to roll out the model at a larger scale outside of the Sandbox. And many firms have found this service extremely beneficial in that scale out and roll out post Sandbox completion. And for the FCA, the Sandbox helps achieve its competition objective by supporting firms getting into the market. And we also see how new technologies and innovations work in the market, and the insights can be shared across the organisation and have helped inform our policy work. If we move on to slide 9, this is our global financial innovation network in helping drive the global innovation agenda. So, as briefly highlighted in my opening remarks, the GFIN is a collaborative policy and knowledge sharing network which is aimed at advancing effective regulatory responses to the use of emerging technologies and financial services by sharing experiences, working jointly on emerging issues, and facilitating responsible cross-border experimentation of new ideas. The role and remit of GFIN was agreed following a formal consultation in 2018, and it operates with a chair and a secretariat. The network day-to-day is led by a coordination group who help decide the focus and strategic direction of GFIN. At the outset, the GFIN intended to operate in that ideation space, where it could be more agile and nimble when it came to considering innovation and its impact on financial services. For that reason, we are careful to ensure that we do not conflict with the role of standard setting bodies or policy-making forums, preferring to focus on collaboration and knowledge sharing related to innovation in financial markets. Currently, the GFIN has 76 participating organisations, including some EU participants who are working together to drive forward the global innovation agenda. This includes areas of market innovation as well, which includes fintechs, as well as through to regtech and subtech, supervisory tech work streams, where regulators from around the globe collaborate for their own benefit as regulators. Over the last year, the network has also been running the first cohort of our cross-border testing work stream.
Ravi, we are running
the global sandbox. So this really allows this really allows firms to test across multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. The GFIN received 38 applications from firms interested in working on cross-border tests, with 23 participating regulators across 5 continents, and 2 of those firms are currently live in testing. And this was the first time that cross-border testing had been successfully achieved within the GFIN, and is a really good example of what can be achieved through the spirit of global collaboration. GFIN continues to grow rapidly, and we encourage diversity of thought and experience within our membership from all corners of the globe and with varied regulatory remits. We welcome interest from regulators to join GFIN and invite all of those who are interested to submit an application via the via our gfin.com website. You could also reach out to the FCA GFIN team to discuss the opportunities to join GFIN further. You can contact us via gfin@fca.org.uk.
Ravi,
so
we are running out of time.
Slide 10.
If you can hear me, please. We're running out of time, but I just have one question from one of the participants here about how long typically is the time frame for sandbox test periods, and are the dates as well as numbers and consumers tightly controlled? If you can cover that and maybe stay on for the Q&A also by the end of the session, that would be great.
Sure, yeah. So to answer that very, very briefly then, so typically we kind of allow for 6 months, but at the same time, we are quite flexible around that. That really depends on the business model, the complexity involved, and what stage the firm are at with their testing. So we say 6 months, but it's not a hard 6 months.
Totally understand. Thank you so much. I think we will move on, and Ravi, if you can stay with us, that would be fantastic. We will take a trip to Sweden, and speak to Claes Malmén, who is an innovation coordinator at the Financial Supervisory Authority in Sweden. Claes, tell us all about what's happening near to me, but maybe a little bit further from some of you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Christina, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here. My name is Claes Malmén, and I work at the Innovation Center at Finansinspektionen here in Sweden. Sweden is a quite small country. We are 10 million citizens, and we are part of the European Union, and we have our own currency, svenska krona. You can change slide. I can change slides. Sorry. First, I would tell you a little bit about Finansinspektionen's services, and then go down to the Innovation Center. But Finansinspektionen is an authority that lies under the Swedish government and the Ministry of Finance here in Sweden. And we have three main assignments. First, we grant authorization to firms that want to offer their financial service to the public. And we also issue regulations and supplement and provide details regarding acts and ordinances issued by Swedish legislation or EU regulations. And of course, we also supervise and monitor all companies operating in Sweden, Swedish financial markets. We are covering banking, securities, insurance sectors, and around 2,000 firms are under our supervision today. Our mission is to contribute to a stable financial system with high confidence and well-functioning markets, and also a high level of consumer protection. And as of 2020, our government instruction also includes an assignment to promote the financial system's contribution to sustainability. The financial sector plays a key role to initiate this transition. It's very important that we take part of this. So these are our four main missions. So we don't have any direct mission from the government to promote innovation or promote competitions like Ravi talked about at the FCA. But we have, within the mission of well-functioning markets, there are expectations that our consumers have access to convenient and effective financial services. And over time, this will not be the case without great innovations and sound competition. So at Finansinspektionen, we are positive to the fast developments we see and the innovations in the financial sector today, as long as they are in line with our main missions. For example, high level of consumer protection and sustainability. This differs a little bit from the FCA mission they have. We started our own innovation center back in 2018, and we cover two main missions. And the most important mission is to act as a first point of contact for companies that are unsure about regulations, processes, and principles that apply to financial innovations. And we arrange meetings with our experts and give guidance to these companies. So this is our most important mission. But we also have a main mission that the innovation is a monitor the fast development of new financial technology, as well as new business models. There is happening so much in parallel right now. For example, the AI, the blockchain, the crypto assets, and we have the open finance space, and of course, the general digitalization of the society, and with the cybersecurity risks that comes with it. It's fragile. So the Innovation Center mission is to prepare our own organization for the future within these areas. So that's the second mission for us. And at the moment, we can't offer actors in the sector any sandbox facility, mainly because we, according to Swedish law, can't make any exceptions from the legislation. But we are very interested to hear what FCA say and other countries that have sandbox to closely follow the outcome and how effective they are, to see if to evaluate if we in Sweden should start a sandbox as well. So we are very interested to hear other countries talk about this today. But regardless of sandbox or not, we in Sweden is often placed in top when it comes to ranking of innovation power. And We also have a lot of Swedish unicorns, as you might know, both in the fintech area, but also in other digitalization areas, Spotify, for example. And we often ask the question what the silver bullet is that makes this happen over and over again. And we used to conclude this into three main reasons. And the first reason that we see this happening in Sweden, we think, is the early public investments in the so-called home computer reform and also investments in fast internet in the late 90s. We believe that this has contributed to an early general adoption and digitalization within our society. That's a very, very important component. The second reason is, I think, a high level of trust for the government body here in Sweden. The high level of trust in our authorities leads to increased security and clear conditions for both the new and existing companies, as well as confidence for the investors in these companies. So that's the second reason, I think. And the third reason is that we can see is that success breeds success in some sense. To see other companies succeed and expand abroad, give courage to younger entrepreneurs, and give also nutrition and to a strong fintech community here in Sweden. We have many skilled developers, like many other countries here in Sweden, and they are attracted to this area. But more important, we think, it's the people that know both the tech and the regulation, the importance of sound regulation. We believe that a high level of knowledge within this regulatory landscape is an important key to success. So our success formula to you as entrepreneurs that are listening today is that to invest a lot of money and energy and time to really understand how you can protect your customers, how you can avoid to be used for money laundering, and how you can make sure you contribute to a sustainable financial sector. These factors has been important looking backwards, but will be even more important going forward. Finally, I will got to move on here. Finally, I would tell you a little bit about how you can get in contact with us, but also, as I mentioned, Finansinspektionen doesn't have any direct mission from the government to promote innovation or promote competition. Instead, the government has established a separate innovation agency called Vinnova. Vinnova is the Swedish innovation agency that address finance-related innovation as well as other kind of innovations. So Vinnova is a very good starting point if you are needed of funding for any innovation you might have. Then we have two fintech companies, Swedish Fintech Association and Fintech, Swedish Hub for Fintechs, that can be a good help for you as new in the Swedish market. I can recommend them. And if you're interested in the fintech landscape of Sweden, we can promote the newly updated fintech map of Sweden made by Invest Stockholm. So that's a very short and brief introduction to Finansinspektionen and our Innovation Center. And please feel free to send us an email if you have any questions, or drop them in the chat, and we'll try to answer them right now. Over to you, Christina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claes. Really good advice and great contact details for organizations and contacts that can take your business further in Sweden. Thank you so much. And please do keep your questions coming in the chat. We will pick them up by the end. But before then, we will take a trip now to Lithuania. Evelina will be telling us more about the newcomer sandbox from the Bank of Lithuania. So Evelina,
good afternoon.
Over to you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Claes, and thank you, Ravi. So I will continue with the Lithuanian fintech landscape. So let me begin by introducing myself. I am a project manager for newcomer program dedicated for new market entrants in Lithuania, and also the project manager for Sandbox at the Bank of Lithuania. So today I will shortly introduce our story, the story about our fintech sector, and being small country with 3 million people, we are recognized as a European fintech hub right now. And the story of the Lithuanian fintech ecosystem began in 2016 when the fintech strategy was confirmed by the Bank of Lithuania, Finance Ministry, and other governmental institutions. It was a great example of institutional cooperation, and the main reason for these joint efforts was a high concentration in the banking sector. So today we, as you can see, we have over 230 players in fintech sectors. We have a few famous brands, as you have already mentioned today. Revolut was the first specialist bank established in Lithuania. During last year, we also welcomed 4 new market participants, 40 new market participants, and we are now like the number first in the EU by the new fintech license issue. So how we have achieved this success? Let's continue to our toolkit for newcomers and toolkit to foster innovation in the financial sectors. As you can see, this toolkit includes few sandboxes. It's a regulatory sandbox, and also LB Chain, which is technological sandbox at the Bank of Lithuania. We also have a newcomer program, the one-stop shop for all market entrants. We also have Centralink, which is infrastructure for payment service providers. The newest addition to our toolkit is our EML center, dedicated to mitigate EML risk in both public and market, with both public and market efforts put it together, because email center consists of both governmental institutions and market participants. So if we look deeper to regulatory sandbox, we were not the first. As Ravi presented today, UK established Sandbox in 2015, and we have established our Sandbox in 2018. And we believe that the sandbox is like two-way street, which helps on one side, it helps market participants to bring their new innovative business models or services to the market. But on the other hand, it helps us as regulators to understand the impact for innovations, because we believe that new innovative business models or never before seen technologies can also bring some challenges and unexpected risk. That is why we believe that we as regulators should also adapt as fast as the industry, and the regulatory sandbox is the great tool to do it. So the criteria for our Lithuanian sandbox is similar as in the UK, and the same criteria was presented today. Just one comment that we are expecting that participants in the sandbox would be able to provide services in Lithuania after the testing. So the genuine idea, also willingness to provide services in Lithuania, which could bring benefits for our customers, are the main criteria. And this criteria is, as we assessed this criteria when market participants sent their applications. The sandbox is open all the year, so the applications can be sent during all year, and after the ideas are chosen, we also have the second phase where the testing plan is evaluating, because the ability to proceed to Sandbox is also playing a important role. And the tools which we use in Sandbox is active consultation. We also use the principle of proportionality and no enforcement measures unless it's necessary. And I would like to share a few success stories from our Sandbox. So the first is peer-to-peer insurance platform was tested in the Sandbox last year, and this year we have established the P2P insurance guidelines in Lithuania, which would allow market participants to enter the market with such new business model as peer-to-peer insurance platform operator. So we are very proud, and this is a very great example how Sandbox can be used to bring new business models into the market. We also had the technological Sandbox LP chain, which was dedicated to test DLT technology. So we had this initiative in 2019, and the firms can explore the DLT technology. So this is one example more related with technological testing. And the latest news is that we was one of the two we were the leading regulator in one of the two cross-border testing cases in the GFIN initiative. So we are very proud of that. And together with other regulators from United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, Kazakhstan, and Bermuda, we have used our Sandboxes, and we have tested Polish firm. And during this case, we were trying to explore sustainability or climate-related risk, and we have tested the tool for templates. For the tool which could be used for reporting for sustainability data. So the results for this cross-border testing was that we have developed POC models to collect and analyze sustainability data. We also explored dictionary of concepts and classifications, because the topic choose was very wide. So we had the ability to explore different regulations and different dictionaries. And also we have few spin-offs. So we explored not even banking sector as we planned in the beginning, but also insurance and investments. So this cross-border testing brings our Lithuanian Sandbox into even higher level and opens a new chapter for our Sandbox, because now our Sandbox can ideas which is tested in our Sandbox can reach global customers, I guess. And another very interesting experiment which we have done at the Bank of Lithuania is the world's first digital coin. which we have established using also blockchain technology. So this was like experiment, but the experience chain in this project will be used in further developments during digital Euro project. So this is a good example how experimentation also can bring experience for us as regulators. And to sum up a little bit, and as you can see, we are we are trying to be technological driven organization, and we are very interested in all the experimentation, and which we have developed the toolkit for newcomers to foster innovation in financial market. But as the results today, we see that in our financial market, we see a lot of payment institutions. So we will continue, and we would welcome new firms entering our market, especially in wealth tech and insurtech sectors. And what's next for our sandboxes? So we have become the member of coordination group at the GFIN. So we believe that we will help to improve the cross-border testing initiative even further. And we, as you probably know, the cross-border initiative for EU level is also around the corner. So I believe that ideas testing in the sandbox at Lithuania at our national level will be bring to the European level or global level. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Evelina. And I see your contact details there as well. Perfect.
Yes.
We'll now go a little bit more south. We will head to meet Rita Soares. She is Head of Payment Innovation and Policy Division and at the Bank of Portugal. Rita, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Many thanks, Christina. Good morning. Many thanks for inviting Banco de Portugal to participate in this section. It is a pleasure to be here discussing this topic with all of you. I am, as Christina said, Rita Soares. I'm currently responsible for the Innovation and the Policy Division in the Payment System Department of Banco de Portugal. First, let me start by saying that we do not have currently a regulatory sandbox in Portugal for the financial sector. We have an innovation hub, which is what I will present today. It is called Portugal FinLab. Portugal FinLab was launched in the end of 2018. It is a communication channel between innovators with tech-based financial projects or products and the three Portuguese financial regulatory authorities, which are Banco de Portugal, which is the authority responsible for the regulation and the supervision of credit institutions, payment institutions, financial companies, and money institutions operating in Portugal. We have also joining us CMVM, which is the Capital Markets Authority in Portugal, and also ASF, which is the authority responsible for the supervision of the insurance and pension fund companies. Through Portugal FinLab, the authorities provide guidelines to the participants on how to operate in the Portuguese regulatory system. The purpose of Portugal FinLab is to support innovative solutions in the fields of Fintech, RegTech, and InsurTech through cooperation and common understanding. The main benefit we aim for is to provide innovators that engage with Hub with the clarification of their regulatory questions, the reduction of the time to market of their products, and the compliance of the projects with the regulation in place since the beginning. We normally launch one edition per year, and therefore we are currently conducting the third edition of the program. Each edition has 2 batches, and we have already received more than 100 applications since the beginning of the program. So who can apply to Portugal FinLab? The answer is not only startups, but also incumbents and companies wishing to scale. The applicants must have innovative tech-based products in the financial sector and must seek to operate in Portugal. However, they might or might not be established in Portugal. In fact, we already have a very nice share of foreign projects that have the goal to provide services in more than one country and which apply to FinLab. To apply to FinLab, startups, incumbents, and other companies must have into account a set of criteria. The projects that do not fall within the competencies of at least one of the 3 authorities will be excluded from the analysis. The remainder will be evaluated taking into account the need for regulatory support, the innovative nature of the projects, the development status, and the benefits and risks for the consumer and financial sector. Each Portugal FinLab edition is, as I said, 2 batches, each comprising several stages. We start with the application submission. We then select the applicants for the pitch day. After the pitch day, we will select the projects that the authorities will analyze. Normally, we select 5 projects per batch, which means that we analyze 10 projects per edition. Then in the analysis, we try to address the regulatory issues faced by the participants. We then elaborate a report with the results of our analysis, and then we have a closing meeting. Let me say that the report covers the main regulatory aspects required for the project to operate in Portugal. However, the report does not replace the need for the authorization procedures, and the authorities' future decisions are obviously not bound or restricted by the views expressed in this report. As I said, the 3rd edition is still ongoing, so let me share some data on the previous 2 editions. In those editions, the authorities have received over 70 applications, which shows the interest of this initiative for the fintech market in Portugal. The majority of the applications were from Portuguese companies. Even so, around 25% of the applications were from foreign fintechs that intend to operate in Portugal, which is already a nice share. Regarding the project's nature, authorities have been challenged by many different business models. A relevant number of projects combined several financial services, which require the involvement of more than one financial authority, which is a big advantage of Portugal FinLab because we have all 3 authorities of the financial sector around the table. In this slide, we have the applications by sector. We have a considerable share of projects in the fields of payments, capital markets, RegTech and crypto assets, among others. As for the type of regulatory questions that we have tried to answer, we had a considerable share that related to the conditions to obtain authorization to provide new payment services foreseen in the revised Payment Services Directive. We also have many queries on the requirements for security transactions and robo-advisories. We have some projects in the field of InsurTech, among other teams. Obviously, that we also had some projects which were out of the scope of the competencies of the authorities, and therefore we do not analyze these projects. We have some questions, for instance, related with GDPR compliance for solutions that use large amounts of data. The feedback received from participants is quite positive. They above all highlight the role of Portugal FinLab in closing the gap between innovators and regulators. And so why do we consider that Portugal FinLab is appropriate for the Portuguese market? First of all, because we have a considerable number of business models that apply and that combine several financial services, which are in fact the projects that benefit more from a joint assessment from the different authorities. We have many Portuguese fintech entities which are still in a very early stage of their projects. They are above all in seed and pre-seed stages. So it is the appropriate time to obtain clarification from the authorities. We continue to have demand from foreign projects which seek to operate in Portugal and which need to know what is the regulatory framework in place. And we continue to have a number of applications which is by far higher than the number of projects that we are able to analyze. Also for regulators, Portugal FinLab is in Portugal, is important. It continues to be a way to enrich our knowledge on the fintech entities that operate or intend to operate in Portugal. And FinLab is also important to anticipate questions that might impact our functions. As well, it is an instrument to achieve the level playing field between incumbents and new entrants. And this is important for us because we have to be governed by the principle of same business, same risks, and same rules. This is just a slide for the third edition, which is still ongoing. We are now in the phase of delivering the reports to the participants selected in the second batch. We are finalizing the edition now. I can already share some data on this third edition. We continue to have demands. We had around 30 applications, and consequently, we reached the 100 applications by now. In this third edition, we have almost 20% of projects which were foreign. Pre-seed and seed projects continue to dominate the applications. And as for the sectors, we continue to have a considerable share of the projects in the fields of RegTech, payments, capital markets, and crypto, just like in the prior two editions. For each edition, we publish a report with the main conclusions of the edition. You can find this report in Portugal FinLab website, and by the end of this year, the report of the third edition will also be available. You can find our contacts here. I stop here my presentation. Many thanks.
Thank you so much, Rita. That was really useful and good with some contact information. Also, please do note, and the slides will also be available, of course, to you later on. Unfortunately, our Spanish speaker is not able to join us due to unforeseen circumstances, so we will fly directly to Italy and meet with Martina Tambucci, who is head of International Relations Office at CONSOB, and her colleague Pasquale Munafo, who is Senior Officer at CONSOB. Welcome to you, Martina and Pasquale.
Thank you to you, Christina, for the presentation. So no need for me to go through that. So let's go straight into the presentation of the forthcoming regulatory sandbox in Italy. And let me take you through some background in terms of legal foundations for that regulatory sandbox. The legal provision setting up a regulatory sandbox at national level actually dates back to 2019, but it took a while to have the implementation rules, which were finally adopted by the Ministry of Economy and Finance, but after close cooperation and consultation with the three national competent authorities involved in the project: Bank of Italy, which has some responsibilities for not only the financial stability, but with respect to banks, but also with respect to some other financial intermediaries. Then CONSOB, which is the securities regulator, and IVES, which is in charge of the supervision over the insurance sector. This means that the Italian regulatory sandbox is cross-border by definition. I mean, every project might either be focused in a specific subsector of the financial sector. It might involve, for instance, a bank wanting to experiment the onboarding of clients and thus be confined to the banking sector, but it might also involve the three sectors, and in that case it requires a close cooperation among the three competent authorities. The other very important characteristics, which is dictated directly by the law, is that the admittance to the sandbox usually entails exemptions, but not with respect to the compelling EU harmonizing legislation, but with respect to regulatory and supervisory provisions adopted by any of the three authorities that I just mentioned. In implementing regulation adopted by the Ministry of Economy and Finance, the most important aspect that I want to emphasize today is the four categories of entities, activities that might be accepted in the sandbox. The first category is composed of entities wanting to start activities that are subject to licensing or registrations by the authorities, which means that in parallel such entities apply to receive both the admittance to the regulatory sandbox and the required license or registration, which will be tailored depending also on the exemptions agreed between the applicant entity and the authorizing national competent authorities. A second category is composed of entities wanting to perform activities that would be subject to licensing or registration if these were to be offered to the general public, which means that by entering the protected space of the regulatory sandbox, actually such entities will be operating without a proper license or registration. The third category is that of outsourcers of regulated supervised entities, and the fourth category is that of regulated supervised entities which want to experiment, for instance, a particularly innovative technology in doing their ordinary activities and want to have this close and special relationship and dialogue with the national competent authorities. When I wrote by the left below corner of the slide, FPS, this means freedom to provide services, and this is specifically a reference to the last two categories, because the outsourcers might be providing services to the benefit of regulated supervised entities within which there are also entities from outside Italy, but operating in Italy under the freedom to provide services, as well as the fourth category, including regulated supervised entities, may also include operators from outside the Italian territory, but operating in Italy under the freedom to provide services. So this is, I mean, the degree of openness of the regulatory sandbox to the rest of the world. But for the first two categories, one of the requirements is that the applicant entity is incorporated in Italy. CONSOB, in terms of, I mean, cross-border testing, is fully committed to contribute to the work of the European Financial Innovation Facilitators, which is a working group assisting the European Commission in many tasks. The FF is currently working on a framework to facilitate the exchange of information at the level of authorities in case of entities operating in more than one national regulatory sandbox, or where the activity that these perform in one sandbox are relevant, may have consequences in jurisdictions outside that of the sandbox. But I'm saying actually nothing new, because a number of other European authorities, at least the ones from which we heard before, are involved in the FF work. As for the GFIN, CONSOB is not yet part of that. It is something that we will be probably consider after having gained some experience in the field. Over to you, Pasquale.
Yes, Martina, and thank you very much also for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today. And as Cristina said during the introduction, I'm Pasquale Munafo. I work within the International Relations Office at CONSOB, and I'm also the chair of the IOSCO Committee 8 on Retail Invest. Let me now go in more depth on the main features of the Italian sandbox. So in terms of eligibility criteria, the admission to the Italian Fintech Sandbox would be subjected to the activities to be performed meeting certain conditions. The first one is innovation, that is the activity would be conducted through information technologies or would innovate banking, financial or insurance services and or products. For example, some indicators in this regard could be the use of technological innovation, the lack of similar products, services or processes in the national market, or indeed an innovative business model. Derogation, meaning that the activity performed by the applicant would need a waiver to one or more laws, regulations or guidelines at the national level, which implies, as Martina said, that derogations cannot concern level 1 European laws and other mandatory European rules. So derogation can be meant not only in technical terms, but also as an experiment to evaluate if the release of a product, a service, or a process can cause any compliance issues. Added value, that is the activity would bring, for instance, benefits to end users in terms of quality of the service, promotion of competition, access conditions, availability, protection or costs, and so on. Then the activity would be in a sufficiently advanced state for testing. And finally, the activity would be economically and financially sustainable, or otherwise would have adequate financial coverage. With reference to the submission of the application and related documents, the application might be filed towards the competent authorities depending on the activity to be performed. So application can be submitted during time intervals up to a maximum of 60 days, communicated from time to time by the competent authorities to the FinTech Committee. So the entity applying for the Italian Fintech Sandbox would be requested to provide the following documents, so a detailed description of the project, its objectives, its duration, the reasons why a trial is required, and so on. So a proof of concept addressing the sustainability of the project, an indication where applicable of the supervisory guidelines or acts of a general nature adopted by the supervisory authorities, as well as of the rules or regulations adopted by the same supervisory authorities. An assessment of potential risks and a specific indication description of the appropriate measure that will be taken to control them, and the specific tools put in place to protect users, which will include, at least among the others, the correct and complete information about the experimental nature of the project and the risks involved. So in relation to the procedure for the admission to the Italian Fintech Sandbox, each competent supervisory authority will, upon receipt of the request, evaluate the completeness of the request, whether the conditions for the admission are met, whether the request for derogation of applicable laws, regulation, or guidelines is appropriate, and whether the activity in the ways in which it is proposed might result in a case of the circumvention of legal or regulatory provisions other than those for which the derogation is requested, the appropriateness and effectiveness of, among the others, the risk mitigation measures and the instruments adopted for the protection of users. Finally, in connection with the activities performed by or towards an entity resident in an EU country and performing its activity under the freedom to provide services regime in Italy, if the exercise of its supervisory powers ensures adequate protection of users, also in view of the controls carried out by the supervisory authority of the other EU country. So the evaluation of the application shall be summarized within a report and forwarded to the committee's technical secretariat within 45 days. So the project will be subject to a trial for a maximum period of 18 months. At the end of such period, with the consent of the competent authority, a monitored entity might file for an extension of the trial period. Finally, let me just give you sort of quick overview of the timing and organizational issues. So in June 2021, in preparation for the kickoff of the Sandbox concept, created an internal multi-divisional working group made out of supervisory departments and other non-coordinated offices as the International Relations Office. In particular, to handle the design of all the activities related to the Sandbox, starting with the definition of a specific administrative process, the identification of the exemption that could be requested by the applicants, and a more elaborated assessment of the access requirements. So starting from the entry into force of the decree law, as clarified by the Italian Fintech Sandbox decree, with regard to the opportunity to liaise on an informal basis with the competent authorities through the dedicated section that has been set in the authorities' website, we established a dedicated point of contact through which potential applicants can get in touch with us for setting informal meetings and as a means for exchanging information and views. This said, after a coordination between the authorities involved, which is intending in a continuous way, it has been decided to define the first cohort for the Sandbox from the 15th of November to the 15th of January 2022. So with regard to this kickoff window, it has been also decided not to fix a maximum number of applications. So to sum up, the Italian Fintech Sandbox decree constitutes a key step for Italy to develop the fintech sector in the safe harbor provided by the Sandbox. So the issuance of the decree represents also an interesting opportunity for third countries players that wish to enter the Italian fintech market. So we leave you finally with our reference for any other details. So I stop here and give the floor back to Cristina.
Thank you so much. This, I think, is the marks the end of our presentations and the beginning of our Q&A session. So thank you very much for sending in your questions. I've got quite a few. So I'll just start and I'll ask the panel just to take turns in answering. So the first question has to do with the when you have a sandbox test running, and during that time, during that testing period, what is the relationship with the data protection agencies in the various countries, if any? How does that work? Does anybody want to go first? Pasquale, do you have something around collaboration with the data protection agencies in Italy, maybe?
I mean, just we are the start of this, this path for us. Anyway, we have, as already said, this collaboration within, different agencies, and also we have the collaboration with the with the authority which is in charge of privacy. So whenever we could have these problems inside the sandbox, we can get in touch with the privacy authority to discuss and to check whether we have any kind of issues and problems related to data.
Super. Does anybody else want to come in on that question? No, not really.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute there. So I think for us, it's really about ensuring that we are compliant with key legislation, particularly around GDPR compliance, and also we work really closely with ICO. They have their own sandbox for specific data issues as well. So we work hand in glove with them too.
Wonderful. I have a question. I think that we've talked quite a lot about GFIN and sort of the international collaboration. Is there a way to apply for sandboxes across several markets, or is it all market by market? How does that work?
The first part of your question, you broke up there. You mentioned something. Was it GFIN you mentioned? Sorry.
Yeah, just international collaboration with regulatory companies and authorities. And the question is, can you apply for more than one sandbox, or is it country by country?
Yeah. So what we've operated, I mentioned it in the discussion in the presentation, was our cross-border testing, which is one of the key work streams of the global foundation. So what the cohorts have enabled people to firms to do is to apply through our GFIN website to cross-border testing. So it happens that way. It's not operated on a rolling basis like the Always Open sandbox. But it is in pilot stage at the moment, and we will be working through how best to operate that going forward. There is still an absolute key need and appetite from GFIN members to have that facility in place. And if there's a need to do it in a different way because of appetite and interest, then we'll absolutely be looking at that going forward.
I think there is an appetite, so maybe that's something
Definitely.
to consider. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. Just staying with you a little bit, Ravi, because there's a lot going on in the FCA, and maybe you can tell us more about the Green Fintech Challenge. I know that I have a question there that relates to what you're doing on that side. A little bit, 2 words on what you're doing there and how we can engage with you.
So we've had a number of initiatives over time which encourage innovation in the interest of consumers, and our Green Fintech Challenge really sort of builds upon the successes and the pilot that we ran on the Green Fintech Challenge in 2018. And so we're currently running a second Green Fintech Challenge, which is there to support the development and live market testing of new products and services that will aid that transition to net zero economy. So it's really timely, especially given the fact of the in-flight COP26. So we're encouraging applications from firms developing innovative green solutions that require that regulatory support. And it's open to startups, it's open to incumbents and technology providers that meet our eligibility criteria. We're particularly developing innovations in the area of environmental, social and governance, so ESG, data and disclosure. For example, products and services that will enable transparency and disclosure and reporting on sustainability by companies along the investment chain, helping consumers better understand the ESG characteristics of relevant products and providers they engage with, as well as provide visibility around alternatives aligned with their needs and preferences.
Yeah, I think that there is
Only means
an
we will
appetite
consider
to
all proposals in the area.
super.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're breaking up a little bit, so we're talking between each other. I have a question for you, Evelina, because you have been launching the world's first digital coin in Lithuania. And can you tell us a little bit about how Lithuanian authorities are addressing increasing concerns related to cybersecurity and privacy and sort of those macro financial risk in financial services? What initiatives and action could you think about that would help us manage those risks and support private sector innovation as well, as you demonstrated?
So, as we have begun with the EML risk mitigation, we believe that we will see more like private sector and government sector collaboration initiatives. We also participating in all the programs brought by the ECB or SSM. So we first we are thinking about education for supervisors and for the market, and also collaboration. I believe these two ways will be used forward, and also all these micro initiatives as Bank of Lithuania are providing sandboxes and newcomer program. And we can also be proud about our fintech community in Lithuania, because we have like an ecosystem of few associations. So we are we have a lot of consultation, events, and collaboration between regulators and market participants.
Wonderful, thank you. So responding by strengthening the sector. There is a question here which I find really interesting. Maybe you can help Rita to answer this question. Is there really room for all these individual sandboxes, or do each new sandbox cannibalize on the existing ones? And what would be the impact, you think, of new sandboxes? Can they continue to innovate, for example?
Yeah, I believe that they can. Probably I'm not the most suited person to answer this question, because we do not have a regulatory sandbox in Portugal, but I can share with you that the authorities have already tried to assess and study the possibility to have also a regulatory sandbox in Portugal. What we have concluded for now is that we decided not to evolve in that direction, because our assessment of the features of our local market, or our fintech market, lead us to the conclusion that what our fintechs need in this moment, since they are in a very early stage of their development, is regulatory support. We need to address their doubts before starting to test their projects. Obviously, in other markets which are more developed and which are in different stages, not in so early stages, I understand that there's room to have all these sandboxes. I think they might work together. I think that this cross-border framework is very important. And I think that even those countries like Portugal, which currently do not have sandboxes, might evolve in that sense. I can share with you that in the case of Portugal, the National Agency for Innovation, which is a governmental body in Portugal, is assessing the feasibility of setting regulatory frameworks in a range of sectors, including the financial sector. And obviously, regulators will contribute to this debate. So I would say that it depends of the stage of the projects and the stage of the projects in that countries. But at least for now, I can see these sandboxes coexisting.
Yeah, so we will see more than the 50 was already there. Claus, in Sweden, maybe you talked about sort of how you work with Vinnova and others, but could you give an example maybe of how effective regulation encourages rather than holds back innovation, and how you see that evolving in a Swedish context?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we have a Swedish context, of course, but we are part of the EU, and the EU Commission has a quite aggressive plan for the digitalization of the finance sector. So we are quite a lot in line with that when we come to new regulations and so on. And in the history, we have the PSD2, for example, that address these possibilities to innovation. That's a very good example that we can use to see how can the regulation open up for innovation. We see a lot of new type of services surrounding PSD2, and we hope that the Open Finance project will start new innovation projects in the same. So that's a good example. But we also have the AI Act, artificial intelligence. Today it's quite tricky to use AI because the transparency rules, you have to, the black box problem with the AI. So perhaps our financial institutions doesn't use AI and machine learning as they could do, and have better services for the credit scoring, for example, or other services, because the risks are too high. So we think that the new AI Act can perhaps clarify how we can use this technology in a safe manner, and therefore using it better. So I think that's a good answer for your question. When we see good regulation that encourage innovation.
Absolutely. Yeah, very good examples with all these new technologies coming into play and how that all sort of helps us evolve. Martina, in Italy, it seems that your organization, Concept, is currently liaising with the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK. Could you please explain some of the benefits of this dialogue, and do you think there is potential opportunities for collaboration with other European sandboxes and innovation hub from an Italian perspective? We don't have sound, Martina.
I turned on my video, but not the audio. Thank you for the question, because I'm eager to say that we are very happy to have this bilateral discussion with the UK FCA due to its long-standing experience in running live experiments. We just went through a setting up phase in which the processes, as anticipated also by Pasquale, ranging from the initial admittance and the definition of selecting criteria to the definition of protocols to allow, with the experimenting entity, to allow for tailored waivers have been defined. In such a phase, we appreciated very much the support of the UK FCA and having had the chance to discuss with some other European authorities, actually. I think that after having gained some experience, as I was saying before, we could be ready to join the GFIN, as well as we're making up our mind about possible partnership with the UK FCA as well as other authorities to develop together projects like, for instance, running courses specifically dedicated to SMEs, which are quite relevant in our industry at national level. I also found, but that's been already recalled by Ravi, but found particularly interesting the last cohort that had been launched at the level of the UK Regulatory Sandbox, trying to combine digital solutions with ESG objectives. That's very interesting and could represent an example for the Italian Regulatory Sandbox that, for the time being, is just distinguished in different temporary windows. So what we actually call the first cohort is just to give a window for application to come. It's a 2 months window, but this does not mean that there is any limitation in terms of the kind of project that they could want to develop.
Wonderful. So building the green into the fintech, that would be wonderful as a step as well. I just have a last question to all of you before we end this session, because what I have noticed is that during the last year and a half, cash is not king anymore. We don't see cash anywhere. So I just wanted to ask you one question, all of you, if you can take turns. So what challenges and opportunities are the financial services facing in light of the pandemic? Where do you see us going from here? Maybe you want to start, Ravi, in the UK.
Yeah, and I suppose I think one of the biggest kind of challenges, I think, is regarding vulnerability and increased vulnerability in light of the pandemic. So it was only a few years ago that the FCA reported the fact that 50% of UK adults display one or more symptom of vulnerability. And that's now been heightened as a result of the pandemic. I think we're up to sort of 53% by the last report I read on this. So I think that's a real challenge for us. And when you talk about it from a cash perspective, obviously there's increased digitalization. But I think there's also a need to understand, how can we support consumers with access to cash when they need it at their point of need. Especially when you balance that with, increased branch closures, which I know, it's not just a UK thing, it's across the board. But I think, digital and technology-based solutions provide us those opportunities to really draw together the offline and the online world in a much better way than we've previously done. And I think the pandemic has really forced us to really sharpen the focus on that as an industry, as an ecosystem, as regulators, and as businesses with new business models.
Super. Evelina from Lithuania, short answer.
Yeah, so we also see that cybersecurity or outsourcing related risk will be more and more important in the future. And we also are working on digitalizations from our side. We have launched data maturity program, which would help us to mitigate risk and get data more efficiently. And if according to the cash, we do believe that these new technologies and a lot of jurisdictions are exploring CBDC currencies. So in the future, we may see new ways to do payments, and also new services brings unexpected risk. So we, as regulators, should, as I said, adapt fast. And
absolutely, thank you. Rita, in Portugal, cash in Portugal, how does that work?
Well, cash is still an important means of payment in Portugal, but I think that the pandemic has changed almost every person's common habits. So we have faced shocks in demand and supply that we did not expect, and digital interaction was many times the only choice we had. So both incumbents and fintechs and consumers were obviously impacted. I think that the pandemic had positive impact in Portugal on the way payments are performed. We had an increase in e-commerce and obviously cashless transactions. Also, it brought innovation in fields of RegTech, onboarding, fraud detection, cybersecurity. Obviously, we also faced challenges. We faced challenges in many fields like lending and credit, affects revenues, availability of funding for smaller players, to give some examples. But I consider that the trend towards digitalization will continue in the future in Portugal and around the world, because customers will not want to get back to less efficient and non-digital solutions. For instance, in Portugal, the pandemic did more for the urge and increase of contactless payments than all the campaigns that we at Banco Portugal performed before the pandemic. So I believe that it was a catalyst in the digital transformation. Financial sector was not an exception. I think that the different means of payment, including cash, CBDCs, private means of payment, will coexist in the future. We just have to get the right balance there.
Thank you so much. Ooh, we have taken a very brief answer from Sweden and Italy because we're running out of time. Klaus, are you also with your mobile phone?
Very sorry. May I go first as I need to leave for a following meeting? Just a few words. I'm so sorry to introduce a pessimistic note into the debate, but to be honest, I think that we should all pay attention as virtual world has been gaining momentum as a result of the pandemic, not to forget the importance for us as authorities to ensure consumers' protection. And in that respect, I'd like to recall the interesting report that has been published yesterday by the President's Working Group in the US on the need to find solutions for new risks coming from the increasing use of global stable coins.
Thank you so much for that. We will keep that in mind, of course. And very briefly, Klaus.
Yeah, I think Sweden is one of the less cash-used countries in the world right now. So we are cashless, yeah. And we see that it's very fragile, of course, when everything's digitized. But I think we have to focus on the cybersecurity area to cope with these risks primarily, and to be sure that we can pay even if we have some ransomware somewhere. That's cyber security is the most important thing, I think, going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're out of time and we're running out of it. This is the end of our FinTech Sandbox event today. I want to wrap up with a big thank you to all of you, our excellent speakers, who have given us such an inspiring overview of the regulatory environment in your countries. And I hope that you have found this event helpful and you have now all the necessary info and contact details to seamlessly enter the markets represented here today. If you need any more information, we are here to help you, Department for International Trade. You can find our contact details at for DIT at the event website where you signed up. We will also make available a recording of this webinar as well as the speaker slides. They will be there too. So the last thing for me is to thank you all for your time and wish you a very nice day ahead. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.